Titans and Colts. Going through what y'all need to know to make some money on this bitch. All right, so first up, weather. It is Titans at Colts, so in a dome. Weather not an issue in this game in terms of the Titans offense versus the Colts defense. Injuries. Roger Saffold and Ben Jones both listed as questionable, but I expect them both to play, which is a pretty big deal here, given that their backups are. I mean, they're okay. Aaron Bruder was okay last week, but no Adam Humphries, which we'll get to, and no Miguel Pruitt. On the defensive side, Kari Willis, questionable, likely to play. Anthony Walker, also questionable, likely to play. And Bobby Okereke is out. So, first step in terms of the Titans offensive line versus the Colts defensive line. No DeForest Buckner. Should have mentioned that, of course, on the COVID list along with Nico Autry. So, there's some issues here for the Colts. Now, they are still pretty stalwart in terms of in terms of Grover Stewart and Al-Qadim Muhammad, as well as Justin Houston being an okay edge defender. But without Buckner and Autry, they are not really elite in terms of the run defense. And while the Titans' offensive line is now missing a couple of tackles, and they have the questionable alignment, of course, they're not bad. Nate Davis and Dennis Kelly really can push at points, and especially on the edge that is not Al-Qadim Muhammad, there's going to be some flashes of movements. And on the interior, I mean, Grover Stewart is he's a good, strong, fat nose tackle, but he's not a real destructive force, and he's not really a penetrator. And on the other defensive tackle spot, I mean, Taylor Stallworth, Tyquan Lewis, the Colts defensive tackles at that spot are neither of them are really preventative of any success in the run game. So I mean, you're looking at marginal to okay push from the offensive line. So we got the second step here, which is the second level of linebackers and how they kind of interact with the offense here. Now, no Bobby Okereke really matters because the Colts defense is so stout a lot of times, especially against these heavy run teams, like the Vikings early in the year, because they hold the front pretty well and then they let their linebackers make plays. Now, without Bobby Okereke, they're really missing some impact along the front. Now, of course, Darius Leonard's still in, who's notable certainly against the run, but he's not. I mean, he's not Ray Lewis. He's not a single-handed destructive force in regards to the run game. And frankly, the Titans' offensive line, their scheme, their run scheme is okay, and there's going to be some impact from them, especially Dennis Kelly, Roger Saffold. They can get to the second level fairly notably, and whereas they're not going to be, destroying Darius Leonard here, there's a little bit there. As far as the third step, the pass rush, so here you do have some issues with the Titans. Justin Houston is still a okay, speed rusher, and their tackle, the Titans tackles, Kelly and it looks like David Quessenberry is going to be starting left tackle, who was okay last week in the last drive versus the Ravens. They're not perfect, and they can be got, especially by a rusher as good as Houston. Now, he's not crazy, and is he going to be a consistent problem? Likely not. And there's going to be a little bit from the other D tackle spot. Stallworth and Tyquan Lewis are both marginal pass rushers, and the guards for the Titans are certainly not perfect. But in terms of consistent issues, there's really not a lot for the pass rush. And the other edge, I mean, Al-Qadim Muhammad is not a notable pass rusher, and Ben Banigou and Capote Couture, the backup Colts defensive ends, not a lot there. So then you get to the fourth step, the receivers and how they interact. So this is where Adam Humphries being out is a really big deal because, of course, the Colts run a fairly simple zone scheme, but they're very disciplined and they're very good about sitting in those zones. And that is where Adam Humphries would have been tremendously helpful for the Titans here, because without him, you do lack a weapon in terms of consistently finding soft spots in zones. Now, that's not a crazy skill that is unique to only a few players, and A.J. Brown and Corey Davis are marginal at that, but they're not a disaster. Is maybe the more important point. And for the Titans, really outside of the outside receivers, what's more important is, of course, how the tight ends interact with it. And without Okereke here, Darius Leonard is still a good coverage linebacker, but he's not perfect. Anthony Walker is the worst of the two between him and Okereke. Not a disaster, but not a shutdown player. So Johnny Smith and Anthony Firkser are going to have room here to operate, and that's important for the Titans offense. Really important, and probably more important, certainly more important than how their outside receivers operate. And they're not a disaster either. Now, Xavier Rose and Rocky Sin do match up well in terms of being larger physical corners, especially with Corey Davis, who is going to have some issues consistently separating this game. But AJ Brown, not a disaster, and he can deal with the physicality of Rhodes and especially the Sin. And while I don't think he's going to be consistently open or constantly, he's not going to be gone from this game. So the overall run game, once we have all those kind of ancillary parts together, the overall run game, I mean, it's going to be okay here. I doubt that it's going to be just a dominant force because their offensive line is just not good enough at this point for that. But the Colts defensive line isn't destructive, and like I said, without three good linebackers, with just two, it's harder to be consistently filling gaps and shutting everything down. And maybe more importantly, without real penetration, like from DeForest Buckner up front, you're not going to stop Derrick Henry from getting going a ton. No. Al-Qadim Muhammad's really good. There's some chances of that. And again, the Titans line's not perfect, but Derrick Henry's going to have some running starts in this game, and there's likely to be at least a few chunk runs, and it's not like they're going to be stopping him behind the line of scrimmage every play. At least very, very unlikely. So I'd say the overall run game is actually, I mean, it's not going to be crazy. It's not going to be dominant, but it's going to be there. It's going to be useful. So then you talk about Tannehill, so the sixth step, how the quarterback interacts with the defense. And in that case, we have Ryan Tannehill. So he is not a disaster for zone coverage, which is the first thing to consider when you're playing as the Colts, because there are quarterbacks who really just can't handle diagnosing a defense consistently. But Ryan Tannehill is not one of those quarterbacks. Now, he's not crazy at it. He's not Drew Brees, any of that. But he is okay, and especially when given time in the pocket like he'll have here, he's going to be able to find holes, especially given that the tight ends and A.J. Brown are not going to be shut down in this game. He's going to have options, and frankly, he can navigate the pocket fairly well in this matchup. There are times where he has issues with that, but versus the vast majority of their only source pass rush being Justin Houston, he's going to be okay. And he can run the ball a little bit. I wouldn't expect that to be a huge issue here, especially Darius Leonard really helps with that. But he's not going to be a disaster. And when you have the Titans offense with Ryan Tannehill not really being limited and with options to throw to, they always do okay. Their floor is pretty high as an offense. So the the seventh step, we're always telling me I got to get through that, is the overall pass game. And again, I was kind of saying they're going to be decent because their tight ends are options, which are huge in terms of them driving the ball forward. A.J. Brown, of course, always has a chance for a long touchdown, including here. And there are chances at deep balls in this game, too. I mean, Julian Blackman, has been Justin Blackman, that's the name. Go Jags. Julian Blackman has been okay as a free safety. Maybe a little bit better than okay, but he's not Kevin Byard on the other side of this game. He's not a shutdown deep safety. And when you take their corners, especially with Rocky Sen, who has his trouble at the catch point and just with speed downfield in general, A.J. Brown has a chance, and Khalif Raymond too. Khalif Raymond, pretty fast receiver on the Titans, and Cameron Batson for that matter, although he's less of a deep threat, more of a gadget player. There are going to be chances downfield here in this game for the Titans. And Ryan Daniels is going to have enough time to take a chance at him. I don't know if they're going to be crazy here, but there's a chance for sure. So, yeah, then the 8th step, the red zone. Now, the Titans, of course, are tremendous in the red zone, or have been for about a year and a half now. And in this game, they're going to continue to be decent at the very least. I mean, there's nothing really preventative about the Colts' defense in that respect, because the Titans can run the ball at least to an extent, and Corey Davis, if he has anything, he has crazy-ass strong hands, is helpful down there, as well as Johnny Smith, and A.J. Brown, of course, is a weapon in his own right. So they're going to be fine in the red zone. Now, I don't expect them to be crazy, instantly putting in touchdowns because the Colts defense is still stout, but they're going to be pretty good. So overall, I mean, when you take Brian Tannehill without a ton of preventative issues and options that are not incredible but reasonable, the floor is high. It always is. And I know in the last game versus the Colts, they had some issues, which are not impossible here. But even in that game, you got to remember they were leading before the two consecutive disaster punts. So I would put them in the 20s, even maybe the high 20s, because late in this game they're going to be able to throw the ball on the Colts. So I would end up at a range about 24 to 32, I would say. All right, so then for the Colts offense versus the Titans defense. So first injuries, still no Adoree Jackson at corner for the Titans, and no Christian Fulton. And for the Colts, so quite Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, both questionable. Quentin Nelson going to play, I'm sure, here, but Ryan Kelly hasn't practiced all week, and I actually am going to operate as if he's not playing. It'll be helpful for them if he does, certainly. He's pretty good, but I'm going to operate, like I said, as if he's not playing. Also, Zach Pascal, questionable. We'll see. I'm not really sure about that one. And Philip Rivers, technically questionable. He's going to play. So, first up, we got the offensive line versus the defensive line in terms of run blocking. So, without Ryan Kelly, when you talk about interior of Q, Quentin Nelson, Mark Lewinsky, and Danny Pinter, certainly the guards there still do generate push. But I will say for the Titans' defensive interior, at least between Jeffrey Simmons and DaQuan Jones, they're pretty strong. I mean, DaQuan Jones is the most stereotypical, fat nose tackle you can find probably, and he does hold the point of attack, reasonably. And Jeffrey Simmons is a legitimately useful player, especially against the run, and he's going to cause some issues here, and he's not going to get pushed around by any means. Their other spot though, not great. I mean, Jack Crawford, Matt Dickerson, Raul Murchison, whoever they play there, not impressive at all. And there's some weakness at that spot, especially that like Quentin Nelson he can push pretty notably at times. Now there are going to be some losses though, I will say, because especially Lewinsky, but Quentin Nelson too. I mean, he still lunges and loses at least once a game. And Jeffrey Simmons can certainly take advantage of that, but he's not Aaron Donald. He's not going to single-handedly kill them. Then on the edges, so here there's a fairly notable advantage for the Colts. Anthony Costanzo and Braden Smith, good. Not crazy. I think they do get overrated by some people, especially these run blockers. But they are reasonable, and especially they're reasonable for controlling an edge as opposed to necessarily pushing it. And here the Titans' edge defenders, Harold Landry, he's I would say better than okay. He's a decent edge defender as a run player, but he's not. He's not crazy. And Jadeveon Clowney's still on IR, so the other edge, likely Derek Roberson again, who actually I think he's been pretty good the last couple of weeks, but he's not crazy. He's not going to stop the Colts offensive line from rushing success. So there's decent chance to edge push or edge movement and control from the tackles here. So then the second step, as far as the second level goes, so no Jaylen Brown, he's on IR now. So you take the Titans, who are already kind of suspect in terms of run defense, and you take them from two good middle linebackers to one. Because Rashaan Evans is still, good, might be a little strong. He's pretty good as a run defender, but he's not crazy. And their other spot, Will Compton, not really impressive. I know he was kind of okay for Sorians, but they were missing offensive linemen. They had some issues in that game. And he's not, Will Compton's not a disaster, but he's not really limiting to the offense in any notable way. And the truth that from the Colts' offense's perspective, they can affect them. Their scheme is okay. It's reasonable. It's not great. It's not the 49ers or Rams, but it's reasonable. And especially from the guard spots, Quentin Nelson and Mark Lewinsky, they get up there. Especially Quentin Nelson, but they both can really affect linebackers, and Braden Smith can too. And they're not going to combo push DaQuan Jones and Jeffrey Simmons a ton. They can move around them at least okay. And from the edges, they can combo some from there and they can the the stretch plays. The tackles can get out there to them. And Rashaan Evans, for as decent as he is as a run fitting interior or between the tackles player, he's not crazy sideline to sideline. He's not a disaster, but he's not anything ridiculous. So they're gonna be able to affect them a little bit. So then you talk about the pass rush, and here is really the issue for the Titans. It has been all year, obviously, but especially in this game because excuse me, they have two sources, right? And it's Harold Landry and it's Jeffrey Simmons. And Harold Landry here, I mean, he does not have an advantage versus either of the tackles on either side. He is, I mean, he's a fairly one-dimensional speed rusher. He's got a little bit of a bag to him, but he's not impressive really as a pass rusher. He's not preventative, and the tackles here are good. He's not going to consistently beat them at all. And Jeffrey Simmons, while he's good, he's a non-Aaron Donald interior rusher, or Chris Jones second that, but so he can really only do so much at a point, and he is not going to go crazy here. I mean, he can get, especially Glowinski, some, but it's not going to be these like instant wins. It's not going to be completely destructive. It's just going to be notable, but not really preventative. And the other edge, I mean, Roberson, like I said, he's shown some nice stuff against kind of bad tackles, but here he's going to really struggle to generate rush. Although it's not impossible. I mean, I haven't seen him against a ton of good tackles, but I certainly wouldn't suspect anything crazy from him in this game. And the other interior stuff, there's really not really there is effectively nothing from non-Jeffrey Simmons, and then especially in this game, even with the Colts backup center, Danny Pinter. I mean, he's done fine as their sixth lineman so far this year in a couple backup snaps, but he's just not going against anything destructive. Unless they can try Simmons over over the center, but it's pretty easy to help on that. Not a huge deal. So their pass rush is just not really there. And so then you talk about the receivers, four-step, the receivers interacting with the defense. And here, I mean, they're going to be all right. So T.Y. Hilton, he's lost his step. He's really just kind of more of a veteran, finding holes in the defense receiver, but that's definitely useful here. And Michael Pittman, he's shown some good things. Not crazy still, but some useful things for sure. And more importantly, because uniquely, actually, both these offenses maybe more dependent on how they're between the numbers operates as opposed to outside of it, where the tight ends especially. And here, I mean, without Jayon Brown, they already weren't crazy at it, but the tight ends are going to be fairly free to do what they want now. Wiley Cox especially, but any of the tight ends, none of them are they're not Travis Kelce or anything like that, but they're fine. And if you give them time, they're going to find spaces, especially Jack Doyle and Trey Burton too. Both of them actually notably useful receivers. And here, I mean, Kenny Vaccaro, not a coverage shutdown player. Kevin Byard, I mean, he's okay, but they need him as a free safety. You probably argue in this game. And he is, as a man-to-man safety is just not gonna prevent anything from happening over the course of the game. So then you talk about and I should mention Nyheim Hines could be notably useful in this game too. You've seen him kind of go in and out of the Colts offense, but here I would suspect he would be notably useful because, again, without Jayon Brown, they do not have someone who is going to consistently be matched up with him that can deal with him. Now, Nyheim Hines isn't incredible, but he's clearly good enough. He's shown it that he can be a useful player, and I would suspect that to be the case here as well. Now, I will say that the Titans' corner is not as bad as maybe people think they are. It's more of a lack of pass rush issue that makes their stats look so awful. And here, I do think they can actually limit the receivers a little bit. I mean, Desmond King, pretty good. Malcolm Butler, actually still think he's all right. Breon Borders has played reasonably, I would argue, since he's come in. Like I said, it's hard to cover for 8 second situation. And Michael Pittman Pittman and Ty are not great receivers at this point in either of their careers in terms of constantly creating separation. So I don't, think they're going to be running all over open. But again, with as much time as they'll have, they're going to be useful. So then you talk about step 5, the overall run game. So I mean, it's gonna be decent here for sure. I mean, especially over a number of attempts, because while the Titans are not the worst team in the NFL against the run, their personnel here is just not constructed to consistently stop the Colts rushing offense. Now the Colts rushing offense again, it's not the 49ers or the Rams or anything like that in terms of their scheme propping them up, but they're fine. And with the push they're going to generate, especially on the edges, which is probably the most important part, but some from the interior too, as well as, like I said, their non-Rashaan Evans linebacker, likely Will Compton, not a useful player really in terms of stopping the Colts. So they're going to be able to run the ball over attempts here, which is really important for their offense too. So then you talk about number 6, which is Philip Rivers. So this week is really interesting here because Philip Rivers is a definitely interesting quarterback, and he can seem to fluctuate a lot, but I would argue it's actually based on some really specific things. And here, what you're going to see is actually kind of 2 of those come together, which is one being without a pass rush. Philip Rivers is certainly smart enough and experienced enough to take advantage of holes in coverage pretty consistently, and the holes there are going to be in this game, and he has the weapons to exploit those, at least to an extent, with the receivers and especially the tight ends, like I said. But you also have the Philip Rivers special, which is over a period of time, especially against a team without pass rush, he tends to get more and more risky in the pocket, throwing from the pocket. And that is certainly going to happen here. I mean, with the Titans pass rush, and with a free safety as ball hawking as Kevin Byard, there's some danger in him throwing down the field. Now, is he going to constantly be shutting Philip Rivers down? No, but Kevin Byard's legitimately good as a deep safety, and Philip Rivers, like I would probably bet on Kevin Byard interception in this game at some point, or certainly multiple passes defense, because Philip Rivers, like I said, just when he has time to sit in the pocket, he takes risk. He likes to have fun, whatever. I don't blame him, but Kevin Byard can react to that stuff, especially with how slow Philip Rivers throws the ball at this point. So there's some danger, but again, in terms of consistently moving the ball, it's there. The opportunities are there for sure. So then you talk about the overall pass game, step 7. And like I said, it's going to be good, especially for ball movement, like between the 20s, because the tight ends are not going to get shut down, and the receivers are going to be there. The running backs at the backfield, especially Nyheim Hines, all that stuff is available in this game. Again, I don't necessarily think any of that is individually incredible, and there could be some issues in terms of a 3rd and long. No one here is necessarily going to be driving first downs constantly, although that's very few players that do that anyway. But the overall pass game, like I said, especially for ball retention and ball movement, it's going to be pretty good. So then you talk about the red zone, and here is where you run into the issue, because the Colts, outside of a couple games this season, like the Lions, things like that, they do notably have issues in the red zone, and that is a Philip Rivers problem. It has been forever, and here you're going to see that again, because the things that make the Colts offense so good between 20s in this game are really constricted in the red zone, because a lot of that comes down to having time to survey the field and letting his receivers find space over time. And in the red zone, I mean, it's just a lot harder to do that, and the lack of like Jayon Brown becomes less of a big deal because Rashaan Evans can react a lot easier in a smaller space. And now there are still, without a pass rush, he still will have time to find some stuff, and Kevin Byard's usefulness is taken away a little bit there too. But Philip Rivers just as a baseline just isn't that good in the red zone. And while here I think he is probably boosted a little bit by the defense, he's still not crazy, and it's still entirely possible that he settles for a few too many field goals. Again, like the Vikings game early this year, which obviously they won, but I mean they should have won that game by a whole lot more than they ended up doing so. So overall, I mean, again, I think you're talking about a successful offense because when you give Philip Rivers time plus options that are going to be open, um, he's going to move the ball. Now, the red zone could become a problem, and really that's the main problem I would see maybe in this whole game is just the question if the Colts can score touchdowns or not. But it's not like the Titans are are really going to prevent them to any crazy degree. So it's definitely possible. But I would put them in the upper 20s as well. This game probably the same range, honestly, 24 to 32 is where I would land with the Colts for this. So in terms of the lines, so as of right now, you have the Titans +3 on the road, so the standard line, and then you have it over under set at 51.5. So what sticks out to me there certainly as the first step is the over 51.5 because both these teams can move the ball late in the game. They both can throw the ball, especially against the teams that they can't rush the passer. Now, again, the main problem really I see that there's two problems, right? The one problem is either the team's getting ahead, just in general, and being able to run the clock out, run the ball. But here, I don't necessarily worry so much about that because the Titans, while I think they can run the ball, I don't think it's going to be constant, and I don't know that they're going to get the attempts because the Colts' offense is going to be good enough to retain the ball, to a degree, so they don't get 50 rushing attempts or whatever it is. And in terms of the Colts' offense, I do think they would be good enough over a large number of attempts to do that, but it's kind of the same problem where the Titans' offense is good enough to stop them from getting the rushing attempts they need to really control the game. And yeah, so I would certainly lean the over on that. In fact, I'd be very comfortable taking that. Just like I said, I mean, in the fourth quarter, both these teams are going to be able to throw the ball. I can't imagine this isn't a close game. I mean, it was a really close game, like I said, the last time they played that Thursday night until it got kind of completely ruined by those two back-to-back punts that were blocked and then shanked and then blocked, if you don't recall, from the Titans' own 15-yard line, something like that. And that game still almost went over, even given that. So I would definitely take the over here. And in terms of the spread, I mean, I would favor the Titans, I think, because I'm way less worried about them in the red zone. But that's not a guaranteed thing. Red zone success isn't a promised thing in any game to game circumstance. So I would lean the Titans +3, but I don't think it's worth taking. Although I mean if you really believe that they can run the ball, which is possible, like I said, in this game, then I don't completely hate it. Although Colts -3, I wouldn't touch because the last time these guys played, I would argue that the Titans were the marginally better team until that stuff happened, and here, of course, Brett Kern, the runner, is back, so a lot less likely. So yeah, in summary, I would say over 51.5 is good to go, and then Titans +3 is whatever. If you like the Titans, it's fine, but not something I would necessarily do.